think we're live. I know there's always like a 5 second delay on the stream, but I'm hoping that this is actually working properly. So yeah, as you can see in the title, this is my first stream and I'm going to be talking about my origin story. So I think it's worth just, getting into the, I guess, my past and what led me to where I am right now. So if you don't know, then my name's Ian, and hence the channel Ian's Room. I'm 28 years old, and yeah, my dating life was pretty trash throughout most of my life, up until the last, let's say, year and a half. As I came across the cold approach space about a year and a half ago, and I was watching content like many of you guys, and I decided to take action and try to approach for myself. And I managed to get over my fear initially, and then I obviously encountered a few hurdles, lots of obstacles, and the journey's been quite up and down. But ultimately, now my dating life is, I mean, it's literally completely 360'd. I have a much better dating life. I have more options than I ever could have imagined, and more importantly, I'm a very confident person now. I'm, a lot more confident in my ability to attract the girls that I want, and I'm now in a position where I get to even pick certain girls that I want to date, and the quality of girls has improved as well. So, yeah, my dating life has just improved dramatically since I started Cold Approach, and so I decided to make a channel just to document the process, to document the journey, and you'll find older videos that I started about 2 months ago that delve into, what that last year and a half has been like. And so this one is just taking a bit more of a deep dive into pre-code approach. Young Ian when he was a boy, and I guess all the highlights that have led to where I am right now. So I mean, we might as well get started. Although before I get started, just a quick update. So obviously you might see on my channel I've got videos about Thailand. I went to Thailand recently. I actually just got back from there, so now I'm back in the UK, which is my home country. And I'm now basically here for about 10 more days, and I'm going to Kenya. But in the next 10 days, I plan to release the remaining vlogs that I filmed out there in Thailand. So I've got probably, I want to say, 3 more vlogs coming out. And then, yeah, after that, it'll be up to date, and I'll just be pushing out more content, more infields. So you guys will get to see me actually approaching um, in real life. And so those are infields that will be from before my trip to Thailand. So infields that I got filmed by Ephraim, who coached me out in Belgrade. So I'll just put those infields out just for you guys to see what it was like when I initially started code approaching with a coach. And then, of course, a lot has happened since then. A lot of progress has been made since I got coached. So hopefully I'll have more infields in the future. But for now, that's what will come out. And then I'll also release other videos about, like, I guess, topics related to code approach. But anyway, I've been yapping. Um, so yeah, this might be a long one. I don't know how long this will be. So if anybody is watching, or if anybody watches after I publish the stream, then buckle yourself. We'll try and keep it as concise as possible. But this is basically a biography, so grab your popcorn and get ready for a fairly long stream, a big deep dive into my life. But yeah, I guess just to start, I think I'll just start with like my upbringing. So yeah, I grew up in the UK, born in the UK, pretty standard family. Both my parents got a brother, and I guess a good place to start would be primary school because, like all, I'm assuming like most of you, you went to school, right? And I guess if I talk about like how I was as a child, like personality wise, I was a pretty, let's say, introverted child, just based on what my parents tell me. Like I wasn't. I mean, I had my friends, like my family friends. I'm talking about when I was like maybe 4 years old, 5 years old. Um, I had people that I used to hang out with, and I was fairly social, but I was also a little bit weird. And I think I was also a bit of a naughty kid, not like super misbehaved and causing a lot of trouble, but I was more so like the kind of kid that would play around with the other kids, but like I don't know, like just be a bit of a nuisance, you know? Like there's a lot of pictures of me as a young kid, like making funny faces and like, you know, playing pranks on other kids at parties and stuff. So that was I guess the kind of way that I was, the kind of little kid I was. And then I went to school, and yeah, I mean, like, you know, I had a fairly normal, let's say, primary school experience. So yeah, I grew up in the suburbs, so that was a little bit different. I was, you know, like I was like one black family in a very white suburban part of the UK. And so that was a little bit different because I guess I kind of stuck out in that way. But aside from that, I had a fairly normal primary school experience, which lasted up until I was like 12 years old. So I had my group of friends, used to ride my bike after school with my boys, you know, go to sleepovers, you know, play sports, invite guys to my house, you know, for the weekends, go out, play football. Fairly standard childhood. You know, I had friends. I wasn't like socially isolated or anything like that, thankfully. Um, so yeah, my experience was pretty standard, to be honest. But yeah, I guess the main point from that phase, from like 5 years old up until, let's say, 10, 11 years old, was I was different in the sense that I stuck out. Like I was the only black kid in a school that was full of like other, you know, white kids and stuff. So I guess the reason I bring that up isn't necessarily because that was a bad thing. Like I never experienced any like serious issues or, you know, getting teased heavily or racism or anything like that. I can't sit here and say that that didn't happen at all. Maybe there was like one or few comments that were made here and there, but like it was more so like in a bantery way and like in the way that, you know, kids are innocent, kids say silly shit all the time. So it wasn't like malicious from those kids. It was just kind of like, oh, you look different. Yeah, you don't look like me. And like I also understood that. So it wasn't like from a place of hatred because we were kids. Like most kids aren't like making fun of other kids from that like sort of hatred perspective. So I'm not gonna sit here and say like, oh, like that was such a bad thing. Like it wasn't that deep. Um, but yeah, like I said, I had my friends, so pretty standard. And then when it came to girls, so I remember my first crush. You know, this girl called Sarah, and yeah, that was like my first crush. That was the first time I was like attracted to a girl. I guess at that point I must have been maybe 10 years old. So it was like year five or year six. And yeah, I mean, all I remember is that I just felt different. You know, it's like, you know, that first time you're attracted to a girl and you realize boys and girls are different. Like, I'm sure you guys, I don't know if it's the same in America, but in the UK, we used to have this concept of like coochies. Is that what it was called? Coochies? It was some weird thing where like you were scared to like catch coochies from girls and you'd be like, ugh, like girls get away from me. But then there's a point where that switched, right? Where instead of girls being like this alien race, you know, it's like all of a sudden now we started liking them. And that was the first time when I really felt that like attraction. But I didn't act on it really. It was just something that you would talk about with your boys, you know, you'd sing those songs like this person and this person sitting in a tree, like KISSING, like all that silly kid shit that you do when you're young. And so you know you tease your boys about it. They tease you. It's like it's not that big of a deal. It was fun. If anything, it was quite fun actually. Um, but of course, I was like what 9, 10, so I didn't have any like I wasn't like making moves or anything like that. Um, the only thing I remember is like one time me and my friend were like with this girl like in like one of those like playground tunnels, and then like we were just like I don't know what we were doing. We were just like joking around with each other, but I think that was the first time that I felt nervous around a girl. You know, like it was like me, him, and her, and we're all like having fun. But then yeah, I think that was the first time I really felt that like nervousness. But either way, yeah, that happened, and then I guess that was my experience in primary school. Not much action with the girls as you'd expect. I mean, I'm young. And then what ended up happening after that was I left the UK. So I went to Kenya. I went to Kenya to like a international boarding school, and I basically, yeah, I you know had a completely new environment, new culture. My parents didn't want me to go to school in the UK for secondary school, so they found this nice international, like, I guess, private school. Um, and that was a big, like, change, right? Because, at this point, I mean, I'm used to growing up in the UK, right? And now I'm going to Kenya, which, even though that's where my parents are from, I wasn't that familiar with the culture. But in my head, I wasn't too against it. When they told me that I was going to Kenya, I just kind of went, okay. I was a fairly curious kid, so I didn't really, and I don't think I rebelled against it much. I didn't even really feel homesick. If anything, I kind of saw it as a new adventure. But of course, it was still, fairly, let's say, difficult to, get, I guess, get acquainted with the new culture and, get used to, you have to imagine, before I went to Kenya, I was in the UK and I'm surrounded by, like, basically all these white people, which is fine. But then now I go to Kenya and all of a sudden I'm around people who look like me. So it's a very different environment, right? Um, and so that took a little bit of getting used to, but it was fun. It was cool, right? I guess in that sense I didn't feel different. But then what ended up happening was I still felt different because I was now the black British kid and everybody else was like actually Kenyan, actually Ugandan, like from different parts of East Africa, different parts of Africa. There were some other kids from the UK and other kids from like America, Canada, etc. But it was very much a. I still felt different because now I had this like really thick British accent, but I looked like everybody else, but I sounded different. So I still stuck out like a sore thumb. And so again, like that whole like weird identity crisis thing started to, let's say, manifest itself again. Although to be fair, it's not like I got made fun of for that. Like if any, at first it was like I got made fun of a little bit, but then eventually people kind of found it cool because I was like a novel person. I looked like everybody else, but I was different. So I guess it kind of worked in my favor. And then of course, eventually, once you make your friends and everything, it just becomes a normal thing. And then also like over time, I started to, let's say, integrate into the Kenyan culture, just because I was spending more time with Kenyan people or East Africans in general. So I started to, let's say, assimilate, and I lost a bit of that strong British accent, and then I kind of like I guess became a bit more akin to what all my friends were like. So yeah, that process was fine. Like again, making friends was cool. In fact, at this point, I started to really like sculpt a cool friendship circle. I played sports, played football, watched football. I had a lot of friends. Like I was like kind of part of the nerdy group, and then also part of the sporty group. I even used to dance, so I was part of like this cool like dance group that used to do like break dancing and hip hop dancing. And I was essentially like fairly social. Like I had a good like social standing, and it wasn't that difficult for me to make friends. So by all accounts, everything was going fine. Yeah, it's going fine. Like this is around like now year 7, year 8. So now I'm like 12, 13 years old, and yeah, everything was going well. Um, and then so one time, I guess the first story would be one time in year 7. I was a bit of a class clown at this point, so I still used to take jabs at people. Kind of. I guess I used to like use it as a self-defense mechanism, but I also used to be a bit of a joker. So I remember one time in class I made fun of this girl, and she did not like it, and she got she got physical, and decided to boom like punch me, and that was like a very like odd experience. Obviously, like I was very embarrassed by that, like getting punched by a girl as a boy, like not great for your street credibility. So yeah, that was a fairly let's say embarrassing time, and I mean I wouldn't go so far as saying like it was like super traumatic, but of course like that kind of affected my confidence a bit because I got made fun of a lot for that, understandably so. I mean that's kind of what happens when you're in school and that kind of thing happens to a guy. And so I guess looking back, I probably overinflated how bad the experience was in terms of like what people thought about it. But at the time I was like very self-conscious. And that was the first moment where I became very, again, self-conscious about like my strength. like, let's say, my masculinity. Of course, at the time, I didn't think about it like masculinity. I didn't even know what that word meant. But I guess I just felt like a weak boy, and I was a fairly skinny kid as well. So this is when now the negative thoughts start spiraling in my mind, and I start comparing myself to other guys and stuff. So yeah, that was like a fairly significant turning point in terms of just my general confidence and how I saw myself um, amongst my peers. So yeah, that was a big moment for sure. Um, and yeah, and then when it came to girls, so yeah, this is again, of course, I'm getting older now. I'm past 10 years old. I'm 11, 12, and I'm developing more attraction to the girls in my year group, right? So, and bearing in mind I'm in boarding school, so you're spending a lot of time with, girls in different social settings. And yeah, I started developing attraction to this one girl, um, but I didn't really count myself as somebody who could get her anyway, even this early on, just based on the kind of, I guess, conversations I was having with other friends and seeing who she was receptive to and that sort of thing. And again, I wasn't alone in this. Like, as you guys will know, in school, pretty early on you start to know where you are on that, let's say, hierarchy of, who gets the girls. Like, it's always the athletes, I guess Americans would call it jocks, but like the athletes, the guys who are like strong and like, successful in sports, or the really charismatic guys. And to be fair, at the time, I was, like I said, I was a bit of a joker. I was fairly social. So maybe I wasn't like the most athletic person, but I was still like part of different groups. So maybe I shouldn't have counted myself out, but either way I did. And then this one time I remember the girl I had a crush on, so, you know, she, I don't know who I found out from, but somebody told me that she wanted to go on a double date with me and my friend, right? And so you can imagine I'm like, oh, this is cool, right? But then I was a little bit confused because I thought, wait, she wants to go on a date with me? I was like, that can't be true, right? Because at this point, I never had any indication that she wanted to go out with me or that she found me cool or attractive. I mean, don't get me wrong, I used to speak to her and other girls in her, like, let's say, popular girl circle. Like, whenever like her popular girl circle would talk to like my popular guy circle, like, yeah, we interacted, but I never got that direct sense that she actually liked me. So of course I agreed, and I remember it must have been like a Saturday, and I remember it was a rainy day, and we went to this like common area where people can hang out in the school, and me and my friend rock up to the, let's say, like social area, and then it's the hot girl, and then it's her friend, and then I very quickly realized, okay, so I'm not on the date with her, I'm on the date with her friend. So I'm just kind of being used as like a way to, like, I don't know what it was. I guess she just wanted somebody else there, and she thought, or they thought, that it made more sense to do a double date. And so basically I got like her friend, and I didn't like her friend, right? I liked her. And of course, like, the friend that she wanted to actually go on the date with, which was my boy, um, he was like a super popular guy, like probably the most popular kid in the year group, because he was the best at sports. He was also like a fairly good-looking guy, had curly hair, light skin, mixed race guy, and he was a good friend of mine. And it's funny because I'm probably gonna see him in Kenya in a few weeks, because I'm going to a wedding and we're still like in that same social circle, so I might see him there. But yeah, at the time he was like, basically like a really popular guy. And so now it dawned on me that, oh, she likes him, and I'm guessing he also likes her. And then I'm gonna be paired up with the other friend who, I don't want to say she was ugly, but I wasn't attracted to her. And that was the first time it really got solidified to me that, at least at the time, you know, I'm like here, and like this friend of mine is like here. And so you imagine, like, subconsciously, even though I was young, I wasn't stupid, so I could kind of see what was going on. And so again, like, this is the kind of stuff that would sort of fuel my negative insecurities, because I'll think, oh, I have to look like him, or be as good at sports as him, or be as athletic as him, in order to get this girl, right? And so that was like a bit of a, let's say, humbling moment. And so yeah, that happened. But again, I moved past that. You know, it was just one little double date thing. Um, and yeah, but that was like another, let's say, interesting moment, right? And then yeah, of course, throughout that period, you know, I didn't really pursue girls that much. So now we're still talking about year seven and year eight. So this was in prep school. So there was preparatory school and then there was senior school. So prep school is year seven and year eight. So this is all happening in prep school, right? And so I'm still young, like I haven't had that much experience with girls anyway, whether it's shooting my shot or going on dates. Um, and so I think the only experience that I had was like, I think we used to do this like silly thing called the kissing tree, where you'd go to a tree and like you'd be paired up with like certain girls and then you'd like go behind the tree and like give them a peck and then like you'd be all excited and stuff. It's so funny looking back at this stuff because as guys we were so gassed, we were so happy. But yeah, I probably did. I remember doing that with one girl who again was she was okay, but I guess at least I got something right because not all the guys got to do that, right? It was only a certain like group of guys, and so because I was part of the popular group, I was let's say lucky, lucky to be a part of it. But that was the most action I ever got in prep school, you know. Um, and then I moved to senior school, and so now this is when I go into year nine, year 10, year 11. So now I'm hitting my teens, right? So now I'm turning 13. And this was a pivotal moment because this is when all the guys in my year group, or a lot of the guys in my year group, started to hit their growth spurt. So this is when we're hitting puberty, right? And what happened was I noticed that a lot of my friends, they were getting taller and they were getting bigger and more muscular. And I was getting taller too, but I was still quite skinny. And I've always been a fairly skinny guy naturally. And this was never, my skinniness was never really an issue in prep school or in primary school. But once I got to senior school, I started noticing this gap. And what ended up happening was I would associate dating success in high school with whether or not I was big, right? And so again, I became more self-conscious because I would compare myself to these guys, right? And you know, the insecurity around my body, that's when it really started to snowball. Um, and it got worse with every like rejection I got in senior school, which is now the time in my life where I actually shot my shot. Like I would actually go and like tell some girls that I liked them or make a move at them at the summer camp or you know we used to go for these camping trips outside the school and I you know you would in the evening when the teachers have gone to sleep like we'd all sort of meet up in this like secret part of the area and would like you know make a fire and like banter and you know some guys would like take a girl and go to like you know behind the shower behind the like the accommodation area and you know do whatever and so you know I'd try and like slyly shoot my shot. Thinking back I was probably very indirect because I didn't have that much confidence, um, but nonetheless I would try every now and then but I wouldn't be successful, right? And so yeah, so senior school was when I really started to experience a lot of rejection, which was funny because I actually got more clout in senior school, right? So I was getting more clout. I was still part of the popular group. I was playing more sports. I was also really like excelling in my academics. So I was also seen as somebody who was pretty smart. And I used to play the drums, so I started playing the drums for a band, and I got more clout in that sense. And I was, yeah, by all accounts, a popular kid, yeah, and fairly social as well. I still had my weird idiosyncrasies, you know. I liked to play video games. Like I remember me and my boys, we used to play Call of Duty on our laptops using a wireless LAN network. Shout out to all the guys who know that struggle. And we'd like play for hours on a Sunday. Because remember, I'm in boarding school, so I'm not going home or anything. And so we would, you know, excuse me, we would like, you know, just play for hours, right? So I was still quite nerdy in that sense, but I wasn't like a, you know, super recluse. You know, I was still going out there and socializing. So, you know, I should have been seeing some sort of success. And bearing in mind, I talk about the whole like physicality thing of how, there were guys who I started to notice they were the ones who got the girls and they were bigger, stronger, faster, better, let's say better looking, whatever, and maybe more charismatic. But on the charismatic part, I actually realized that they weren't that much more charismatic than I was. Maybe they were a bit funnier, but ultimately, like there wasn't that big of a difference. But in my head, I didn't see like personality as a determining factor in whether or not you could get the girl, which is so silly because now looking back, there were guys who got girls in my year group who were just as skinny as I was. Like I remember there was one guy in particular, and so it's like why? So why could he do it, but I couldn't do it? But like I never really thought about it in that way. So you can already tell that in my mind, all I'm looking for is anything that can confirm my already negative bias rather than seeing the bigger picture. And so that was happening more and more with every rejection. And so I remember one instance in particular. This must have been in, I want to say, year 11. So 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 my boy, a friend of mine, like he broke up with this girl, and then a few weeks later, I decided, you know what, I might make a move on her. Now looking back, like I can't believe I did that. But again, I was very desperate, needy, scarce mindset, and I liked her, right? So I gave it a few weeks. Maybe you know what? I think I only gave it like a week, which is so bad. But like I said, I'm a little bit like ashamed of that. But I was young and immature and silly, and like I said, desperate. But yeah, so what we used to do when we used to like try and shoot our shot was we'd go to the girls' boarding house and we'd call for their name and we'd like go to the door and be like, hey, can you get me so and so? And then like she would come out and then you'd go for like a 30-minute walk around the school, chat, flirt, and then if you're lucky, maybe like you kiss her or whatever. But either way, you're just trying to like shoot your shot and go on this like mini date, right? And so I remember I'm nervous as hell, nervous as hell. It's right after sports, so it's maybe like 4 p.m. and right before dinner. So I have this like 1 hour window, and I go to the dorm, and I knock, and I'm like, we'll call her Jenny for this sake, even though that's not her real name. But I go to the door, and one of the girls comes up, and I'm like, yeah, can you go fetch Jenny for me? And then she looks at me and goes, okay. And she can already tell what I'm on, right? She knows that I'm trying to like, shoot my shot. So I'm standing there waiting by the patio, and then Jenny comes out and she's like, yeah. And I'm like, let's go for a walk. And she's a little bit hesitant at first, and then she kind of just agrees and goes, okay, cool. And like we walk, and as we're talking, I can see that she's starting to realize that I'm trying to shoot my shot. Now, I have no idea what I said. I must have been nervous as hell. My voice must have been super just like high pitched. I mean, if you recorded me, I'd probably laugh and just be embarrassed, but either way, I shot my shot. And then, yeah, I basically like walked her down to the other side of the school and we talked for a bit. And it's funny because as we were walking, like, of course, other girls in my year group were like in the area, so they could also see that we were together. And I could just tell, and this really hit me. I could tell that she was like a little bit embarrassed that like she was being seen with me, and like I was perceptive enough to gauge that, and that was like that kind of hit me a bit. But I didn't let that stop me from like continuing the date. And so, yeah, we were talking. I remember we went to like the English block, which is where all the English class would happen, and we were like just by outside by the window, and we were talking. We had a nice private area to just chat, and eventually she just basically said, "Yeah, I'm not interested. I don't really like you like that." And then I just accepted it, and then walked her back, and that was that. And so yeah, that was like I guess that was the first time I, to my credit, actually tried to get the girl outside, talk to her, try and flirt. Now, of course, if I look back, I probably went about it in a very like immature, not even immature, but just like rookie way, right? But I tried, but I was unsuccessful. I failed, and so that obviously hit my confidence a bit. And of course, my boy wasn't happy about it once he found out, and that was a bit of I guess like a riff between us for a little bit. But then we got over it eventually. and actually apologized to him. So we made up, and he was a really good friend of mine. So we got over that at least. I didn't completely destroy that friendship. But yeah, that was like, I guess, like another turning point. And then also at the same time, so around that same time after that, there's another girl that I used to be in a lot of classes with. So this girl, I was attracted to her, and we were in many classes together, like biology class, English class, math class, and we used to sit next to each other. And so this is the beginning of my friend zone experience. So this is when unknowingly, I was deep in the friend zone. And it was funny because a lot of my friends, they knew that I liked her and they would tell me, but I would pretend as if it was otherwise. So I'd be like, nah, I don't really like her like that. Like, we're just friends, bro. Like, but of course, deep down inside, I wanted something to happen. I was just too scared to tell her that I liked her. Yeah. And I think at some level, she also knew, but she never brought it up. And so I remember for like pretty much close to a whole year, that last year of senior school, I was just, yeah, we spent a lot of time together, but I would just be like that friend, right? It was very platonic. And what I remember what ended up happening was she would have these like mini relationships with other guys in my year group, and I was still like the friend, and I was just kind of like a bystander. And at the time, it was so funny. Like, she'd be asking me for advice about like certain guys that she was like dating, like temporarily, and I'll give her advice, but like it kind of felt like, damn, I wish I was that guy. Like, I wish I was in that position. So looking back, it was a mess. Like, I was cooked. I don't know how I didn't see like what was going on, but I guess I was playing the long game, and so I just kind of entertained it, kept it going, just in the hopes that maybe one day, if she's single again, then I can confess my desire for her, and then we can live happily ever after. But that never ended up happening. And so yeah, that was like another big, let's say, moment in my, let's say, dating history where, again, just poor decisions, playing that like long game, friend zone game, which never works, and again, losing more confidence as a result, you know, and training myself to hide my desires, right, and not be forthcoming or forthright, which isn't helpful. But of course, I had nobody telling me what to do, right? Like, I didn't have an older brother who was like, taking me around his arm and being like, "Hey, little bro, like, what are you doing, bro? Like, that's not how you do this. Like, this isn't how you move to girls. Like, nah, nah, nah. Like, don't do that. That's needy." No, I didn't have anybody telling me that. And my parents were also pretty strict. Like, they'd actually tell me to not date, like throughout primary school, throughout high school, throughout sixth form. They were like, no dating, books, academics, focus on school, don't be getting involved with girls. So they weren't giving me any advice at all. And so I was just kind of alone. And I was also very embarrassed about talking about my rejections with my friends. I always wanted to like prove to them that I was cool and that I got girls, even though like the evidence clearly showed otherwise. I even remember I would lie to my friends and tell them that whenever I used to go back to the UK for holidays, because my parents and my family were still based in the UK, and so whenever school finished, I would go back to England every now and then, and I would come back from those holidays and tell my friends, yeah, I met this girl and we went out bowling, and I was completely fabricating it, like lying. And it's so sad when I think about it, but I was trying to put up this facade that I was a guy that got girls, even though I didn't. Yeah, so you can imagine, of course, even if I wanted to get advice from my boys about how to move to girls, I was too embarrassed to admit that I needed help, because then that would completely destroy this 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 like fake persona that I'd built up, right, to certain guys. So I wasn't getting any help anywhere. Even though looking back, I probably could have gotten some help from my guys because they would have obviously put me on game, but I was too too egotistical, But I was young, so I have grace for myself looking back. But yeah, that was like where I was at the time. And then yeah, and then the last story from that, let's say, high school, senior school period. So now at this point I would have been 16. So at the end of our exams, so GCSEs, me and like five other guys, we decided to book a trip to a place called Mombasa, which is like a coastal city in Kenya. It's a very nice place, beaches, beautiful, great weather. And we thought it would be a great place to celebrate the end of our exams. And so we invited 6 other girls, 6 of, let's say, the hottest girls in the year group, right? And they all agreed. And so we planned this whole trip. And so to my surprise, my parents actually allowed me to go. And so I was super excited, so excited. Like me and my boys are like, bruh, like we're gonna be, we're gonna get all the girls, we're gonna go out clubbing, we're gonna get to have fun, party, hook up, do everything that we've always wanted to do, right? And we were already like planning who was gonna hit on who. And so this was supposed to be like the moment, right? Like I'm building it up in my head, like I'm finally gonna get to shoot my shot and be successful. And so the trip happens, and I mean, I shot my shot, did not land at all. And then all my other friends who came on the trip, apart from, let's say, one of them, like they all got play. Yeah, they were all successful. I mean, I even remember one time, like we came back from a night out, and I walked into one of the villas. So we rented out a villa, and I walked into the villa, like must have been 4 a.m. And as I walk in and go through the living room, I see one of my closest friends like making out with this other like hot chick in my year group, and they're doing it on like the couch and stuff. And I'm just like walking through awkwardly, like trying to get to get to my friend's room. And of course, like in my mind, I'm like, a part of me was like, oh, like well played, bro. Like this guy's like doing his thing. But a part of me was also quite envious, right? Not in like a bad way, but just like in a damn, like I wish that I could like be in that position. Yeah. So of course, again, like I start comparing myself to him, and I start feeling like a piece of shit. I start feeling insecure, and I'm like, I'll never get that. And I remember like going up to my room. So I'm sorry, going up to my friend's room, and like me and the other guys who didn't really get anything that night, like we're bantering, we're having fun. I think we were like playing FIFA on the PlayStation. Um, but then like in the back of my mind, I'm like disappointed, right? And then of course like my boy comes up, and he's like, you know, gloating, and like we're all like going back and forth and hyping him up. So I was obviously proud of him, but at the same time, like I was kind of jealous, right? Um, and then yeah, I just didn't get anything that entire trip, like nothing. Like maybe we went to the clubs and would like grind with the girls, and we also met other girls from other schools who were also there for the like post-exam summer holidays. But I was just getting a couple of grinding things here and there when you grind to music in the club. That's about it. Nothing else really. So yeah, basically got nothing. And I came away from that trip feeling even more insecure, because at that point I thought I am completely hopeless. Like I can't get any action no matter what I do. It doesn't matter if it's at school, it doesn't matter if we're going on trips, it doesn't matter if we're partying with girls, drinking, etc. Like nothing works. Nothing works. And so, yeah, that was a pretty pivotal moment again. And then I come back to the UK, right? So at this point, I'm 16, and I come back to the UK for 2 years, which is what we call sixth form. So it's the 2 years before you go to university. And so now I'm moving back here. And again, it's another culture shift, because I left the UK when I was 11, and now I'm coming back when I'm 16, 17, which doesn't seem like that much time, but you can imagine in that 5 years, that's like a 5 year period of puberty, adolescence. I'd already become acclimatized to Kenyan culture. So now I'm coming back to the UK, and I have to integrate again with like the British way of doing stuff and British humor. So like it took a bit of time to get used to that. But again, to my credit, I found my friendship group, and I was still playing sports. Again, I wasn't in the popular group now, so there was definitely that like in those 2 years, I definitely took a step down the, let's say, social hierarchy. If we're gonna get like if we're gonna go into evolutionary psychology and the Jordan Peterson route, I was like lower down the totem pole. Um, because when you join like a new school, or you join a new year group that late on in the high school period, you're already entering an environment where people have already they've got their social circles, they've got their friendship groups, so it can be a bit more difficult to like pierce into that. So I think I struggled a little bit, but eventually I found my friendship group and I was fine. But um, but yeah, again, I still had those like identity crisis issues because now I was like British, but then I'd kind of lost touch with that side of me during my time in Kenya. But then I'm also again sticking out a bit like a sore thumb because I went to another like international like private school, I guess. But it wasn't like it was a very again like it was a predominantly white school. There was a bit more diversity in this school. Like we had guys from China, guys from Russia, but again they didn't really look like me, so I still kind of felt like I stuck out a bit. But again, it wasn't like a big issue. I never experienced like racism or anything like that, so that wasn't a big deal. Um, but it was funny because when I left Kenya, that summer between my last year in Kenya and my first year in the UK, I was actually excited. So I thought that, oh, I'm gonna go to the UK and all these girls will think I'm cool because I'll be like a different kind of guy that they're not used to. And I used to buy into this idea that like girls like guys who look like me, like British girls like that kind of like that energy. So I was like, maybe I'll find it easier, right? Maybe I'll find it easier. But reality slapped me across the face and was like, nah, bruh, nah, bro, it's not gonna be that different. And that's what ended up happening. So, I think one big thing as well here was one of the reasons why I was excited to be back was because I thought it would allow me to open up my wings a bit. So in boarding school, there's a lot of rules and it's quite strict in terms of what you can do. So there wasn't much freedom. They were very strict about like guys and girls doing certain things. And so we couldn't throw house parties or, get up to that sort of like fun, let's say debauchery, which which a lot of kids get to do when they're in, you know, high school. So yeah, I didn't get to do that, right? And so I was looking forward to that when I went to the UK because now I was going from boarding school to day school. And so I was expecting to go to house parties every weekend. And even when I arrived in the UK, a lot of the friends that I made, they were telling me all these stories of the house parties they'd been to and all the crazy stuff they'd done with girls, which was crazy because at the time I was 16, 17 now, and they were telling me about all the crazy house parties they did, like guys, fucking on couches, getting girls, doing stuff with girls like in school, bathrooms and stuff, at break time. And meanwhile, I was like 16, 17. I'd had like what, one or two pecks from a girl, like a little smooch, and that's it. And so a lot of my friends had already lost their virginities at this point. So I already felt like I was an outsider. I felt so inexperienced. And so when they were telling me these stories, I thought, oh, I can't wait to get involved in this, right? So, but of course, my parents were super strict. So I wasn't allowed to go to house parties. Even though I got invited, I wasn't allowed to go out. And everybody else drank in my year group. And then, of course, I wanted to participate in that, a bit of peer pressure as well. But I didn't do it, right? And I wasn't allowed to do it. So I kind of missed out on that social aspect, which is also going to tie into, when I talk about my university experience, because when I went to university, that was the first time I actually got, let's say, true freedom to like just do whatever I wanted. So, but of course, that's a bit further ahead. But in sixth form, during those 2 years before uni, again, same old story. I think I talked about it in one of my vlogs. There was a girl that I liked, and I shot my shot through Facebook Messenger. So I added her on Facebook, and then I messaged her some, silly line, I guess some stupid like opening line. And sorry, let me drink a bit of water. I've been rambling for a minute. Mm. So yeah, I messaged her on Facebook Messenger. I think I told her something like, you can be my Malaysian spice, because for context, she was from Malaysia. And so I tried to make a funny, witty joke like that. Did not work, unsurprisingly. And then I went to school the next day, and I walk into the sixth form common room, which is where all the kids hang out before class in the morning. And as I'm walking towards the doors, two guys walk out and they have these big grin on their faces, and they're looking directly at me, and I'm thinking, why are they looking at me? And one of the guys walks through and he starts reciting the line that I sent to that girl. And so as soon as I hear him say it, my heart drops, because I'm like, oh shit. She told them, and of course she must have told other people. And so I remember they get to me, they tell me the line. I try to laugh it off, but like deep down inside my heart is racing, because I'm already at this point a very insecure teenager. Like, I already tried to do stuff in secret. Like, I was already trying to like, move to these girls secretly. I didn't want people knowing if I got rejected. So the fact that now this was out in the open, I was like, oh no, this is like the end of the world. It felt so embarrassing. And of course that became like a running joke for the next few months. And I remember that day, like when they came to me, I just avoided the common room. So instead of going inside, I went straight to my classroom where we do the registration, and I was just sat there thinking, ah man, how am I gonna deal with this? Like, this is so embarrassing. I can't believe she exposes my message to all the guys and all the other girls. And yeah, that was like another embarrassing moment. I don't want to say it was traumatic, but I took it fairly seriously. Like, it definitely affected my confidence, right? And I think at that point I lost a lot of trust. I kind of felt like people were out to get me, and and then again, like, I would just compare myself to the guys that were actually getting these girls. So that was around the time when I even tried to, and I started going to the gym. I tried to go to the gym. I had a good friend of mine who was like a big gym guy, and he invited me to come with him. And this is when I started to look at myself and go, something must be wrong with me. Yeah. So just to take a step back, I guess my mindset at this point, right, is I'm broken. I'm not enough. I'm not good looking enough. I'm not cool enough. And who am I to think that I could ever get a girl like this, right? And so, yeah, this is when I really start to have this negative inner dialogue of, I'm insecure, I'm not enough, I suck, I'm a piece of shit, I'm ugly, I'm too skinny, and I'm just like reinforcing it. Every rejection that's happening is just reinforcing this idea, and it was very, yeah, it was tough. It was tough because I think that what ended up happening is like I essentially lost touch with my core identity, and all the parts that I liked about myself, I would just dim them down, because like I said, when I was younger, I was like I had my own like vibe, like I had my friends. I was a fairly funny kid. I was a fairly like I was a bit of a joker, and I played sports, and I was a fairly social kid. But this is when I started to become more introverted. I really just retreated from sticking out. I didn't want to stick out anymore, because sticking out meant, being made fun of, or potentially having my heart broken in a very embarrassing way. And so I was like, screw this. I don't want to do this anymore. And so I started to really, like, those experiences ate away at my confidence, and as a result, I just retreated and disconnected from, shooting my shot. And I wasn't as expressive. I wasn't as opinionated. I kind of kept to myself, and I kept to my friendship group, and they didn't really like. Even looking back, the friends I made at that point, they weren't really trying to move to girls as well. So it just made more sense to be with them, since I could just surround myself with guys who were pretty chill, and we just played FIFA and joked around. But of course, like, those guys were cool, and they were my friends. But you can kind of see what was happening at that point, right? And so yeah, I essentially, yeah. So that was like the 2 years before university, and then I go to university, right? So again, I was very excited to go to university. I was looking forward to it, because again, this is now when I get true freedom. Um, and so I go to university. I'm in a different country. I went to a university in Wales, and yeah, I remember like being dropped off by my parents, unpacking my suitcase, and I'm like, okay, this is it, right? And so for anyone who's been to university in the UK, we have this week called Freshers Week. So it's when all the first year students, they basically party for like a whole week. And it's a way to get acquainted with other people, to, make new friends, have different events, different parties, socialize, get used to the new city that you're in. And it's a really good concept, right? It helps you to really integrate, and get out of your shell. And so, yeah, I participated, of course, me and my flatmates, and I made friends in my flat. So it was a good opportunity for me to reinvent myself because, of course, I left school and now I'm surrounded by all these new people who have no idea about my past. So I was able to reinvent myself and be a bit more confident, be a bit more outgoing, and that certainly helped with my confidence. So yeah, I definitely benefited from leaving home and being in this new environment in university. And so, of course, the topic of girls comes up, and I remember like that first night that we were going out to the clubs in the city center. Where in the kitchen, taking shots, playing beer games, playing beer pong, and the topic of girls comes up, and we're all talking about if we've lost our virginity. And I remember everyone is going around the table. It's like maybe eight of us, and like at this point, like six out of the eight guys have all said they've lost their virginity. They say when it happened, where it happened, and then it gets to me, and I'm like, I'm a virgin. And all the boys, to be fair, like they didn't laugh, but they were like, really? And I was like, yeah, man, like I am. And then a few of the guys were like, yeah, you know what, mate, we're gonna get you to lose your virginity like this week. And then everyone's like cheering, and I'm like, yeah, okay, fair enough. So to be fair to the guys, like they didn't make fun of me. It was actually more like motivational, which is really cool. But of course, I still felt self-conscious, right? Because now I'm like one of the two guys who hasn't lost their virginity, and at this point I'm 18, right? So in my head that wasn't a big deal, but then it kind of felt like a big deal when I was surrounded by these other guys. And so in that moment, it almost became my mission to like lose my virginity in Freshers Week, right? Just to not feel left out. And that's exactly what happened. So I won't go into the whole story, but like I just met this girl at one of the events, and we kind of had a vibe going on. She wasn't that attractive, to be honest. She just broken up with her boyfriend, so I think she was on a revenge tour of, just like hooking up with somebody, and I just happened to be the guy who was there. So yeah, we hooked up. That was my first time. It was honestly, like looking back, it wasn't a great experience because I was so inexperienced, so in my head. I mean, fair enough, I managed to get it up anyway, so I didn't have that issue. Even though even at the time I was definitely watching porn, and I wasn't like in a good place, like mentally, confidence wise, when it came to girls. So to my credit, I still managed to like have an experience with her. Um, but I remember like, yeah, afterwards I felt fairly proud, but I was also a little bit ashamed because my parents at that point had told me not to go out and date, and they certainly would have been really unhappy if I told them that I'd hooked up with some random girl, in university. And so I was actually very ashamed about it, which is a weird feeling because I always thought that I'd be happy, and I was a bit happy, of course, but yeah, I was also very self-conscious and I felt bad about it. And I think that ties into a lot of the shame that I talk about on this channel, where a lot of us have grown up with sexual shame. Right? I didn't grow up in an environment, at least family-wise, where like going after your desires and expressing your sexual desires was encouraged or it was understood. If anything, it was kind of demonized, especially because I was in a fairly religious household as well. So yeah, that was essentially like what really happened. But either way, I was happy for the most part. And then, of course, that was the only hookup I had that entire year, which was, yeah, that was rough. So I used to still go to the clubs. It's university. We're going out for student nights, Friday night, Saturday night. So on average, we're going out two nights a week, and I would go to these clubs. I would dance. Me and the boys would try and hit on girls. Some guys were successful. I wasn't. I remember sometimes you'd go to a club and you'd go behind the girl, try to dance with her. She would look back and just like scurry away, and of course like that would be like an ego hit. And so of course the more times that happens, the more you're like, I'm just not gonna do it because I don't want to get embarrassed in front of my boys. And of course, sometimes some girls would dance with you, but that was it, right? That's where it would end. I didn't have the confidence or the ability to flirt with the girl and like try to bring her back to mine. So as much as I tried, I just failed again and again and again. And I remember there were nights where we would be out the entire night up until 4 a.m. at the crack of dawn when the sun's about to come up, and would go out the club, get McDonald's, 24 hours McDonald's, shout out to it, and then you'd walk home, you'd walk back to your house or your dorm, and I'd walk alone because sometimes I'd go out with my friends who lived in we all lived in different houses. So I would go like a separate route, and I'd be like just walking by myself, dejected, thinking, man, another night, another dry run, can't get any play, and just really beating myself up. And I'd go back to my dorm, probably watch some porn, and then go to sleep. It was really bad. It was really bad. And again, like my self confidence just kept getting hammered time and time again, which sucked. And yeah, it was interesting because so again, like I talked about how I was like in sixth form, I became more introverted and I wasn't as outgoing as I used to be. So this happened a bit more in university. So around my second year and third year particularly, so my last few years of my undergraduate degree, I remember there were 2 summers where I I like purposefully just kind of locked myself into like my house. So I went home to my family home after the last term of university, and I'll spend, of course, summer was like 7 8 weeks, and there was one summer. This would have been I can't remember the specific year, but there was one summer where my parents and my brother they went to Kenya, and I was staying in the UK, so I was kind of helping my dad run his business. So I'm in the UK, like kind of running the business on his behalf, or at least at least helping out to some degree. And I kid you not, I spent that entire summer just like in the house. I went to a few like festivals here and there with some friends who invited me, although I declined many, but I decided to go for like one. I remember I went to one called Wireless Festival. But for most of that summer, or for at least like 2/3 of that summer, I was just at home. I would work for my dad's company, help out where he wanted me to help out, and then I would just stay at home and watch TV or watch movies and order takeaway and play video games. And I became a social recluse, and that was really bad. I mean, when I think about it, you know, the fact that I was so like low on confidence that I didn't really want to socialize with anybody, because at this time I also started to develop a bit more social anxiety, because you can imagine I'm getting more and more in my head, right? The lack of dating success, and then becoming more self-conscious about my physical presence in terms of how skinny I was. Like it was becoming a problem. And so the way that that manifested itself was I just spent less and less time around people. And so that summer I just did not speak to anybody. And I imagine that really affected my like social skills and my ability to communicate with people. And so yeah, I remember going back to university for my third year. So yeah, this was before my third final year of university. So I went back, and that year I was, yeah, very definitely less social. Now to some degree that was a bit intentional, because in my second year of uni, I definitely partied a lot. I went out a lot. I even used to smoke a little bit as well. So like, even though my grades were good, I wanted to get a really good grade when I graduated. So in my third year, I decided to leave my house of guys and go to like a more private accommodation where I would be able to lock in, avoid distractions and just focus on my academics. But I think a part of the reason why I did that was also because I just didn't want to socialize as much. I was more introverted, and so I was tired of like having to deal with that anxiety. So I just kind of disconnected from it. Um, so so yeah, that was I guess that was my uni experience. So overall in uni, of those 3 years during my undergraduate degree, I think I hooked up twice. Um, yeah, that first time in Freshers Week, and then I think the second time was in in third year. Yeah, in third year. Um, yeah, I just met this girl at some like university party, and again, not the kind of girl that I would brag about. Definitely not. Definitely not. No offense to her, but looking back, it's like the girls I'm dating now. It's like it's night and day the difference, right? So, those girls you hook up with where like you wouldn't want to tell your boys about it. Like that's the kind of girl it was. So, but of course I was desperate, scarce. I was just clutching at straws, happy to get anything I could get my hands on. So, yeah, those are basically the only two experiences. And so you can imagine, even at that time, I'm starting to condition myself to believe that these are the kind of girls that I can only get, right? So yeah, it wasn't a good place. It wasn't a good place. Um, but yeah, ultimately, I finished my degree, and at least academically, I was thriving. So I graduated at the top of my class. I got a first class honors. Of course, I was happy about that. My parents were super proud of that. But yeah, and so I decided to do a master's. So I left that town and I went to London to do a master's at a really nice, prestigious university. And so everything else apart from dating and like social confidence was going up. I was doing well for myself. I was fairly successful. You'd go to these family functions where you're meeting your uncles and aunties, and my parents are parading me about, and they're all telling me, "Oh, Ian, you're so smart. Like you're an inspiration to your cousins and your nephews and your nieces. We're so proud of you." And I'm like smiling, nodding my head, going, "Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm happy with what I've achieved." And I was, but I was also like very dissatisfied with dating and just my general confidence. And so there was this weird tension between the image that my family was portraying about me and the perception that people had of me versus how I actually felt about myself. So I felt like a piece of shit. I felt unlovable. I felt terrible in many aspects and very self conscious. But people looked at me from the outside and thought, this is a successful guy, you know? But of course, over time, people start realizing, hey, Ian, like, how's dating going? Because, I'm getting older now. At this point, I'm 21, leaving my first university. And people are asking about girlfriends and when are you going to get a girlfriend and this and that. And I'm like, yeah, I would just give them the answer, like, I'm just focusing on academics. Of course, deep down inside, I was trying to get laid. Of course I was. But it wasn't successful. So, again, my ego prevented me from being completely honest. Um, But yeah, I went to do my master's in London, and it was funny because so me and my boy who I met in that first university for undergraduate, we both went to the same university for our masters in London. And so we even decided to live in the same accommodation during our time in London. And so we were both excited, really excited. And a reason why we were excited is because we're going from this, let's say, smaller city to London, right? We're gonna live there, be in the heart of the most bustling city in Europe, and we were thinking we're gonna go out clubbing, link up with all these girls, because this is a friend of mine that I used to go out with all the time, to the clubs, into the bars, and he was really good with girls. Like he was really successful with girls, and I got a lot of game from him. So shout out to him. He really helped me develop some level of, let's say, competency when it came to flirting. Um, Even though it didn't really help me that much, but it was something. So shout out to him. But yeah, we went to London together, so we were excited, right? But of course, like nothing really happened, right? So I was still super insecure. Um, but I guess to be fair, like there was some moments of, let's say, hope, like a glimmer of hope. So I remember I had a flatmate, and she was pretty attractive, and we had a nice vibe going on. It was platonic at first, but then we used to go out together. It was funny, like me, her, and my friend from my previous uni, because we all lived in the same accommodation. So I would organize these nights out where I would get the whole flat to go out to some clubs in central London. And yeah, there was one night in particular where, we got a bit drunk and things got steamy, and then we ended up like making out in the club, and then like coming back to the apartment. And so we didn't hook up or anything like that, but we did everything but hook up basically. And then of course after that, like I'm like, oh yeah, this is it. Like I'm gonna be, this girl's gonna be my girlfriend, and we're gonna like, be together. And so I tried shooting my shot, and then she was like, nah, I don't really feel it like that. And so then we just became friends again, and then it was kind of awkward from that point because now we live with each other, yeah. So we had to like go past each other when I'm making my Cheerios in the morning, and that first, let's say, few weeks after I tried to make a move on her, it was kind of like awkward. Thankfully, eventually I got over it, and we kind of got back to being friends. But yeah, that was like another rejection, right? Like I was desperate, and I probably, again, looking back, I probably really pushed hard to like get her to get into a relationship, right? But I'm sure I was coming across super needy, so that didn't work out. Again, no surprise there. Um, and then yeah, and then I started downloading the dating apps. Yeah, so this is around 2018. So I start downloading dating apps, Tinder specifically, and I get Tinder, and again, very little success, but I managed to get a few matches here and there. And then I meet this one girl, who was, to be fair, really attractive, probably the most attractive girl I'd spoken to for a very long time. Of course, this is all virtual. And so we're going back and forth. She was East African, so we had a nice, let's say, cultural connection there. And then, yeah, eventually she agrees to go on a date with me. So we go on a date. And to be fair, on the date, like, we had a good time. I mean, I remember she talked a lot. She was a very chatty girl, but that wasn't like a big issue to me. Ultimately, I was just happy that I got a date, right, with a fairly good looking girl. But eventually, I started to realize that she was a bit crazy, and she was, yeah, just not the kind of girl that you'd want to be in a relationship with. Um, and so even though we went on dates and we got somewhat intimate, again, I never got laid. Like I never slept with her in that way, but we got intimate a few points during our, let's say, 2 month fling. But a part of me knew that I can't take this further because she was a bit crazy. I remember she told me stories about how she would like throw, like she threw a plate at her dad once, and she just like nonchalantly said that, and I was like, bruh, I was like, bruh, am I? This is crazy. Like, I need to get out of here. Like, if she'll do that to her dad, like she might do that to me one day, So these like um, these like issues started to spring up, and I just knew I had to get out of there. And to my credit, I'm glad I did because I was very desperate and very needy at the time. So looking back, I could have easily just brushed it under the rug or swept it under the rug and been like, yeah, there's some red flags, but I'm desperate. I want to get laid. Like it is what it is. But I'm so happy I had some level of maturity to be like, no, let me not do this. This could be a problem in the future. So I cut things off with her. And then after that, I remember going to a carnival party. So in London, we have this event called Notting Hill Carnival. So me and my boy, we go to the carnival, and we end up like approaching these two girls, and one of them was Nigerian, the other girl was Kenyan, and my boy is Nigerian, so it just worked out perfectly because we saw them with their flags. And so we walked up to them, approached them. Turns out they were from like Ireland, and so they were only here for the weekend. And so we hung out with them, and then we brought them back to our place. And yeah, long story short, like again, I didn't hook up with the Kenyan girl, but like we did some stuff in my place, and it didn't go that far, but it was something, right? But again, I'm not getting laid at this point. So that happened. So I guess that was a bit of a exciting moment, but again, like my confidence was still pretty low. Um, so yeah, for that entire year in London during my masters, I didn't get laid. Didn't get laid once. So now I'm on like at that point I'm on like a 2 year dry streak, and then I graduate. I get a good grade, and then now I go into work, right? So I get a job, and as I got my job, I got into a relationship with somebody that I actually met in during my masters. So I met this girl early on in my masters, but it didn't really go anywhere when we first met. We were on different courses, but we used to see each other every now and then, walking past the corridor. And then around the summertime, close to when I graduated, we spent more time together because we were working in the same like library. And so at lunchtime we would hang out, talk, and it was all very platonic. I wasn't even trying to shoot my shot, but eventually I could kind of tell that she liked me to some degree, and I kind of liked her as well because we got along. And then once I graduated, I remember she came back from a trip to South America, and then I just on Instagram, of course, right? I go on Instagram and I sent her a DM. I sent her a DM, and I'm like, "Hey, you're back in the UK. Let's go on a date." And to my surprise, she agreed, right? So we went on a date, went on a few dates, and eventually, yeah, she was into me, and so yeah, and then eventually I got laid, so we slept together, had a good night, and then yeah, we dated, and I asked her out at the turn of the year, so this would have been January 2020. So I asked her out, she said yes, and so that was my first girlfriend. And so I got a girlfriend once I graduated, and we were together for like 5 months. And yeah, it was a good relationship. It was fairly short. Of course, I was so happy that I finally got a girlfriend. But the truth is, I wasn't really that attracted to her. Like she was decently good looking, but I think if I look back, I was just happy that I had someone, right? But I don't think I was picking from a point of abundance. I was just happy that somebody liked me, and I was so desperate to get that validation. So the fact that she was willing to take it that far with me was like enough for me to be like, yeah, let's get into a relationship. And to be fair, we got along, right? So it's not like she was like toxic, right? She wasn't like the other girl that I met on Tinder. Like she was actually like a really good girl, wholesome girl. But the truth is, like physically, I just wasn't that attracted to her. And so that eventually became an issue. Um, and so yeah, I ended up cheating on her, which was really bad. And even to this day, I really regret that. But again, like it's funny because before I got into a relationship with her, I would tell guys that like I'm a lover boy, I'm a relationship guy, but the truth is I wasn't. Like I still had that boy in me who wanted experiences because I had such a lack of experiences throughout high school, sixth form, university. But I would tell guys, yeah, I'm a relationship guy and I'm just waiting for the right one. And so in my head, I would dress her up as the right one, right? But in reality, deep down inside, like truly, I wanted to play the field. I wanted more experiences. The issue was I couldn't get them. And then this weird thing happened where, as soon as I got into a relationship, all of a sudden start feeling as if I'm getting more attention from other girls, which was really odd because this was the first time where I could I could tell that girls were either hitting on me or like dropping subtle hints. And so you can imagine the neediness inside me. Even though I was in a relationship, I didn't have the maturity to brush those advances aside because the side of me that really wanted to get girls was like, oh, here's another opportunity. And so I remember there was one night my friend invited me to her birthday party, and she of course invited her friends, and I turn up, and yeah, long story short, this girl who's at the party, I'm talking to her. We have like a bit of flirting going on, a bit of banter. I tell her I'm in a relationship. She knows that, but we're still going back and forth. And then before you know it, I invite her back to my place, and yeah, we hook up. And of course, I felt super guilty. Told my girlfriend right afterwards. She was obviously unhappy, and yeah, it was a really tough period. And then to be fair, we got back, so we took like a break, like a couple of weeks break, and then she forgave me, and then yeah, she came back and we still had a relationship for like a few extra months, but eventually it became an issue, and yeah, she decided to just let me go. And I remember when we broke up, I was obviously super distraught. This is around COVID now, so I bought my apartment and I was living alone, and so we broke up. And it's the height of COVID restrictions in the UK. Couldn't go out and see my friends, couldn't see my family, and I was so lonely. It was depressing. That was probably the most depressed I've ever been in my life, and it was very tough to deal with. And I remember finding out that she already moved on and found a new boyfriend within like a month, and that really hit me as well. And yeah, it was tough. That was really tough. And so yeah, that COVID period, 2020, was really lonely. and I really struggled with my just with my confidence and a bit of my mental health as well. And then after COVID, so now we're going into 2021. Um, so this is when I found self-improvement. Yeah, so hopefully a lot of you guys can relate to this. So I found self-improvement. I also got into the red pill space. Andrew Tate started popping up, and I was watching his podcasts. And to me, I felt like they were preaching to the choir, you know? And so this is when I started going to the gym, started meditating, started journaling. I was watching Hamza videos. And to be fair, like that period of my life was really important, you know, because I wasn't socializing as much, but at the very least, I was trying to improve my mental health, my physical health, my spiritual health, my intelligence. I was reading lots of books. And then, of course, I went across the red pill space. So that was, I think the red pill phase of my life was important because it got me out of bed and it forced me to take action and you know, hold myself accountable. But at the same time, it conditioned me even more to believe that I wasn't enough as I was. And so that was like a sort of dilemma where on the one hand it helped me, but it also shot me in the foot. I'm burping a lot. Jesus, I think I'm very like gassy and bubbly today. Um, but yeah, but I wasn't, you know, I wasn't socializing as much. I even quit drinking because I knew that drinking, I was using alcohol as a way to reduce my social anxiety. So I decided to quit for years. I mean, I literally quit for 3 years. I only started drinking. I only got back into drinking maybe like I want to say this year. Yeah, this year, March, April. So yeah, I spent like yeah, pretty much 3 years just like completely abstinent from it. Again, that was all part of the self-improvement process. Um, yeah, I mean though, yeah, in that like 2020, I guess between 2020 and 2021, I had a few hookups here and there. I remember they were both house parties, and again, the kind of girls that you look at and you go, I wouldn't really, you know, show them off to my mates if I had to, but it was something. But yeah, that was like, I guess the last time I'd had some action, and then I went on like, and then I went on a literally like a 4 year dry streak up until this year, obviously through Cold Approach. Um, but yeah, like that was the start of, let's say, the whole like no fab dry streak, like going celibate, even though you know deep down inside I knew that I wasn't able to get any action anyway. So I think the whole like going celibate thing was just the cope. It was my way of being like, yeah, I'm going on this like spiritual journey where I'm trying to like, you know, not give my energy towards this and transmutate it to this and transmutate it to business or, you know, spirituality. But in reality, even if I wanted play, I wouldn't have gotten it, you know. So yeah, that was like a coping mechanism, right? But either way, you know, that was essentially where my head was at. And so yeah, so that was like I guess the next 2 to 3 years of just focusing on gym, focusing on, you know, trying to level up my physique. And I was really going into that, you know, but it wasn't working. It wasn't working because it came from a bad place. It came from like an insecure place. And then eventually, um, you know, I get into 2024 and I'm like, okay, I've spent this many years focusing on gym, trying to build a business, trying to do all this stuff that wasn't really working for me. And my dating hadn't gone anywhere, right? And I still wanted to like improve that aspect of my life. So I told myself like, okay, start of 2024, I'm gonna like put in more effort into the whole dating thing. Especially because a lot of my friends were like in long-term relationships, people started getting married. And then of course you start getting that like pressure from, you know, family, friends being like, hey, like where's the girlfriend, you know, like you're getting older, you know, at this point I'm what, 20, 26, 27, you know, like people are getting into long-term relationships. Even my younger brother was getting into a relationship. So you can imagine like I'm the older brother and like there's this pressure to also be in one. And I mean, I was telling people I took a break to focus on myself. That was always my answer. You know, I'm like taking a break to focus on leveling up other aspects. But then, you know, I'd always get people telling me, Ian, like you can still level up in other areas whilst also dating. Like, why do you have to do one, not the other? And I was so vehement that that wasn't the case. I was always like, nah, I have to put all my eggs into this basket, put all this energy towards this, and then I'll focus on the dating thing later when I'm like money maxed and gym maxed. Like that was genuinely my thought process. And looking back, of course, it was very flawed, but I was so indoctrinated by that red pill ideology that that was what I believed. And then, of course, I realized it wasn't working. So, without rambling, like I said, 2024 comes around and I make a conscious decision to put more effort into dating. So, I start going out for more parties, I start socializing more. So, my method at the time was just go out to more house parties. I was getting invited to stuff, so, I'd like make moves there. Didn't really work, understandably so. I was probably a bit rusty, but I also started downloading the dating apps, right? So I downloaded a Hinge, Tinder, Bumble, you name it. And then I wasn't finding much success until I had a lucky break on Hinge where I made an account and then all of a sudden I matched with this girl. And she was actually really beautiful as well. But yeah, we talked a bit on text, got her number, back and forth. Eventually we go on a date. Didn't really go well, but we still talked after that. Yeah, and then eventually we cut things off, and she actually cut things off with me, even though I was really pushing to see her again. And yeah, that was a very disappointing experience because, again, at this point, I'm very desperate, needy, scarce mentality. I didn't have any other options. I kind of felt as if like it was this one, like this was like now or never. If I don't get this, then I'm like fucked. So yeah, the fact that it didn't go anywhere and it just fell through, I was very, very distraught. I mean, I remember reading the text that she sent me, this long paragraph, and I was like in my bed, just sulking, being like, oh, like I fucked up the only opportunity. Like this is it. I'm like hopeless. Um, so yeah, after that, I took a break. So I just deleted all the apps. I was like, screw this. I'm not gonna waste any more time on this. And then yeah, there was a few months. So that was around April 2024. And so a few months passed by. Obviously, I'm not on the dating apps. Summer's happening. I'm going out socializing a bit more. I start. I sign up for like improv classes. I'm starting to work on my social skills. Yeah, so I'm trying to get back into the whole social flow, rather than being stuck in my apartment, not really doing anything. So that was a good choice. I'm glad I did that. That definitely helped to, let's say, reignite my social muscle. And then the YouTube algorithm gods, they blessed me on my recommendation page, and I came across a page called Social Animal by Ruben. And yeah, I came across that page, and it was the first time I saw cold approach. And he wasn't describing it as cold approach. He just saw it as getting guys to get over their fear of opening conversations and interacting with strangers. It just happened to be that, of course, a lot of guys had a fear of approaching girls. So I watched those videos. I was binging all of his subscriber series videos because that was the first time that I saw guys who kind of looked like me. You know, I guess if we have to rank ourselves on like physical attractiveness, these are guys who look like me. So I was like, oh, these guys seem to be doing well. Like they were actually having interactions, they were getting numbers. I'm pretty sure a lot of those numbers flaked, but the point is, they were out there getting leads, more leads than what I was getting on Tinder or like fucking Hinge. So I'm thinking this could be like a thing to do. And so I watch his videos, I binge it for like days, weeks. And then eventually September comes around, and bearing in mind at this point I've already done improv classes, which was very scary for me. I've already gone to a few like dating events, like Thursday the dating app, they have these like dating singles mixers. And so I did a few of those just to get myself back into the whole like, I guess, dating scene. And so those were really helpful as well because again they were fairly scary, right? But I got over that fear of socializing and putting myself out there. And then I also went to these like meetup events. So if you guys know about Meetup, it's like an app where you can meet different people for young professional events where people can network. You know, people who move to new cities, it's a way for them to make new friends. So I made a few new friends through that whole platform. And so again, I was really getting out of my shell, you know, socializing more, putting myself out there, getting out my comfort zone. So I kind of came out of, like, coming across his content, coming across Social Animal content. It came at the right time because I was already taking like action. So I was ready to do Cold Approach. And so, yeah, September 14th rolls around and I go out to London, do my first ever approach, Covent Garden. And that was like the catalyst for a complete 360. Yeah, so of course I've talked about, you know, there's a video on my channel called, um, you know, I approached 800 women in 1 year. And so you can watch that video. It kind of delves a bit deeper into that whole journey. But like September 14th, 2024, last year, that is when it all changed, right? And so, yeah, a whole year's passed since then, obviously. Um, and yeah, throughout that year is when I came across Christian's content, came across Ephraim's content, and then eventually got coached by Ephraim. And of course, I went to Thailand, and now I'm here, right? But yeah, I guess that's the origin story. You know, that's essentially the journey I've been on. And I guess the main closing point before I end the stream is just, you know, that was, I've been through a lot of like ups and downs, a lot of, oh, 1 second, a lot of, yeah, just like, I don't know, like tough experiences and having to overcome certain fears and having to reinvent myself and get over certain insecurities that, to be fair, I still hold even now. But I think the main takeaway is that like my past is probably not that very different to yours, right? Like I didn't have a rosy, let's say, path to where I am now, right? Like there was a lot of troughs, a lot of, you know, rock bottoms. I hit many rock bottoms where I genuinely thought, fuck me, like how am I going to get out of this? I feel so bad about myself. And I was a very like to myself person, so I would never confide to people. I would never tell people that I was going through shit. I was just, this was all going on in my own head. So I think looking back, a part of me is like proud that I was able to get over those hurdles. And I guess the main point is I didn't allow them to define me forever, right? So sure, they held me back for years and years and years, but ultimately, I found a way to use that pain and to overcome it through action. And so I call it my origin story because I kind of look at this like from the lens of the hero's journey, where you start from the bottom and then you come up, you know, and maybe you have a raw, pretty shitty beginning, but then like you eventually make your way to the mountaintop. And so yeah, hopefully that just gives you more context on where I'm from, what I've, I guess, experienced, ups, downs, and then ultimately what's possible if you really put your mind to take an action. Anyway, the stream's been going on for 88 minutes. Jesus. I think we're going to end it there. I've been talking for a very long time. Hopefully the audio's good. I have no idea if it sounds good, but yeah, either way, that was quite fun. So yeah, I guess we'll chat soon, boys. But yeah, until then, peace out.